Francesca, is there a separate chat space, or is it for both sessions at the same time? Just to keep track of the question.
Hi, Ineke. To answer your question, I think the chat is for everyone, but definitely we can accept the questions, like if someone can raise their hands and...
Yeah, okay, but yeah.
But panelists, can you please see if you are able to share the screen? Otherwise, I will have to make you co-hosts.
Besa, I'm going to share the screen myself for all panelists. I have collected all their presentations into one file. So I'll do that.
Okay, that's perfect. That's great.
I'm just checking the sound that you can hear me.
Yeah, it's working fine.
Yes, we can.
Okay. Francesca, I think if you wish, you can start the breakout.
Yes, how many people are there?
We have 20 in this room.
People, so,
and we have a few left to be assigned. Yeah, sure.
Let me just share. My screen.
Yes.
Okay. So welcome all of you to this room, and we're going to talk about digital inclusion of older people and people with disabilities today, which are two of the Medici project target groups. And before we start, I'd like to remind you that the session is being recorded and broadcast in the Medici social media and YouTube channel Mapping Digital Inclusion. So this is the agenda for this session. And in the first part of the session, we listen to the presentations of 4 practices of digital inclusion that have been selected among those included in our catalog, Digital Inclusion Atlas. And in the second part, we'll have a discussion with our speakers about how the two groups of older people and people with disabilities can become better integrated in the digital world. And I'd also like to remind you that you're welcome to submit your comments and questions for our speakers in the chat box. Sorry, there's something wrong with my scroll page. Okay, yes. So I'll start by presenting our speakers, and we have with us today Ineke Schuurman, who is a researcher at the Center for Computational Linguistics of Katholieke Universiteit of Leuven in Belgium, right? And Gosia Kwiatkowska, senior lecturer and co-director at Rix Research and Media, University of East London, UK, and Pedro Beitia, coordinator at Fundación EDE in Bilbao, Spain. And unfortunately, he's not with us today due to an academic commitment, but he sent a video contribution. Enrique Gil, senior teacher at the Polytechnic Institute of Castelo Branco in Portugal. And so thank you very much to our speakers for accepting our invitation to join the discussion today. And let's start our session with Ineke Schuurman, who will present the Able to Include project.
Okay, just
a second.
Next page, please.
Just a second. Okay.
Yes. So Able to Include was a European project from 2014 till 17. And its goal was to provide people with an intellectual or developmental disabilities, IDD, to communicate with their friends, their family, their colleagues. And yeah, nowadays it's often using digital means, so mails, social media. So we were looking for social inclusion, using digital inclusion to achieve that. Okay, next place, please. We were with, yeah, at the end with 7 partners. One partner went broke and they had to leave the consortium. So the last 3 partners mentioned here are, yeah, working with people with syndrome, etc. The 4 above were more concentrated on working with the tools. Only Thomas More Kempen in Belgium, they were also yeah, working with the users. And for example, in daycare centers, safe environments, that kind of stuff. There are 2 partners from Belgium in the 4 above. We were both from the Dutch-speaking part of Flanders. So the languages covered in this project were Dutch, English, and Spanish. So no French, although French is also a language in Belgium. But French is not covered. Next page, please. With respect to the users, we found it extremely important to work with them in close collaboration. So we did a kind of co-creation. So we needed to know what their needs, what their wishes are. And they were not always very good able to express that themselves. And in those cases, we were also talking with their carers, with their family, etc. And we also were very interested in knowing how they were working with these tools, how they were using them. And so we did observations, mainly in the same room of them as they were, and 2 or 3, and a few times, 2 or 3 times we did it, using that famous kind of mirror that you see in police stations, where you can see through the mirror and they see just a mirror. But most times it was just in the same room as they and chatting with them, and just to hear, what their opinions was about certain possibilities. So co-creation is, one of the main points in this project. Very important. Next slide, please. As we were working with people with intellectual disabilities, just like Down syndrome, that meant that users were having serious issues with, for example, writing or reading text, understanding text, and also understanding what can be said or can be written. That last point I will, in the last slide, I will come back to that. But for the first 2 points, writing and reading and understanding, we were making use of text simplification. So making complex sentences more easy, or complex words, replacing them by shorter words. So automobile, not automobile, but car. Spelling correction, because they make other spelling mistakes than most other people do, as they are writing in a phonetic way. We are making use of pictographs. When you don't know what that are, think about emoticons are a kind of pictographs, but also all those signs you see in along the roads, one-way traffic, etc., or in the building, just a picture showing where the emergency exit is. That are kind of pictographs. We were also using text to speech. And very important is all, we had very sessions with them, with the users, on how to use tools, because some of them already had a smartphone, but had no idea what could be done with them. It was just a funny thing to have. Next session. Next slide, please. The tools we made, that is, one is called Able Social. That gives them the opportunity to translate between written language and pictographs, or the other way around, or from written language to speech, and not the other way around, not from speech to, say, a written language, because once more, these people have, also some issue pronouncing words, sometimes a slurred speech, etc. That was a completely different topic, and none of the partners was able to cover that. We also have a tool, Able Chat. So, sorry, could you go back one slide? Yes, please. Able Chat was used on smartphones to send messages. So with a much smaller screen. And we had Columba or Able Mail, and that's a mail manager for Gmail. And that makes all of these make use of spelling correction, simplification, pictographs, and text-to-speech. So also Gmail, and the Gmail tool was made more simple for them and to make it usable. Next one, please. Next slide. So also when there are lots of options in these tools, and also the user themselves had the choice what they are going to use. When they are sending, do they want to do to send it out in pictographs or not? And when pictographs, which set? We have been using two sets of pictographs. That's Clara and Beta, one in black and white and one in color. When there is time, I'll show some examples for it. Another set can be added in C. When receiving, they have more or less the same choice. When do they want to receive a message sent to them, for example, in text? But do they want to send it in text? Do they want to have it in spelling corrected? Yeah, how do they want to receive it? So do they want to receive it in pictographs? So in between the outgoing mail and the incoming mail, there's some translation can take place. And sometimes parents and carers can make a pre-selection, because someone who really hates football, for example, does not need to have the pictographs for football when they are sending messages. But that is up to the people using all these tools. Yes, next one, please. Oh yeah, last one already. This one is very important. This is a real issue, because we are dealing with people with intellectual disability. It's very difficult for them to realize what they can say and what they can't say. For example, they will be able to say where Granny puts always the keys, or what the code of what their password is for this and this tool, etc. And one of the few possibilities there, to talk with them, to try to explain it face to face. And I don't see what the real good option is there. So just like what you're doing with smaller children, with 6 or 7 year old children, you also don't say do whatever you like. And for example, in Belgium, there's a very safe website, Why Not? And that gives them everybody the possibilities. It's a limited set of people, and they have to when someone says, okay, I would like to take part, then there are people to say, okay, you are allowed to take part and you are not, because you can say that you are have an intellectual disability, or that you are a teacher, but we checked it and it's not true. Then they are not allowed to take part in that website. But for other side, they can do everything they want, and it's very it's really used a lot. So that's a very good experience we have here. This was the last slides. Francesca, is that some time to show some of the other slides?
Yes.
Or can we do that during the question and answer session?
Sorry. Yes, you mean the pictograph? I suggest, since it's already 10:48, I suggest we go on to the other presentations, and then if you agree, okay? So thanks very much, Ineke, and that was interesting. And I'd like to remind our audience that your comments and questions are welcome in the chat box. And now is the turn of Gosha Kwiatkowska, who will present the RixWiki software. Gosha, the floor is yours.
Hello, thank you very much, Francesca. so I represent RICS Research and Media, which is a research and development center based at the University of East London. We are named in honor of Lord Brian Ricks, who you see in that picture in the middle. He was a lifelong campaigner for people with learning disabilities. He had the personal experiences back in 70s when his first child was born. The medics put him and his wife in a room, and they came with very sad faces to announce that their daughter was born with the Down syndrome, and they were going to take this daughter away, put her somewhere in institutions. They can forget about that they had a child, and they can start all over again. So of course that was the beginning for the Lord Ricks to be aware of what's happening to people with disabilities, and he was head of MENCAP for many years in England, and very active in House of Lords and House of Commons, postulating for the rights of people with learning disabilities. He was also the Chancellor of our university, so we were established back in 2004. With the view that with our mission to improve the lives of people with disabilities through the use of new media technologies. And when we say people with intellectual disabilities, we mean, like Inke said earlier, people with that have some difficulties in learning, sort of problem solving, their memory can be affected, and most of people, I would say actually all of people with intellectual disabilities will face some communication difficulties or have some additional communication needs. So if we can move on to the next slide, please. So we use participatory action research in our center. And like I said earlier, we were established back in 2004. So what that means that since we started sort of our research center, we used or we worked together with people with learning disabilities, their families, and those who provide support, education, health, and social care. And had this participatory sort of action research center, which we called the Living Lab. Together we looked at different sort of software that was available and tested with people how this software can be used. We started with the use of media technologies like cameras, these old big cameras when they became available, the digital cameras where you could actually very quickly take a picture and have a look at that picture instantaneously. We started using those with people and then organizing those pictures into the albums, online albums, and initially on PowerPoint. And so at the same time, we started developing some software tools because we saw the existing software wasn't easy to use and wasn't accessible for people with disabilities. We also started developing our sort of learning materials and guides to not only show people with disabilities how to use stuff and how to make it simple for people with disabilities, but also what we identified, the ways of working, the models of practice, the way support staff was working with people, the way parents work with people, and education staff work with people with disabilities. So we identified the need for what we now call the universal design, where you look at the barriers that people have to access to technologies, but also access to education, access to information. And rather than trying to change the person, we wanted to change the environment and change the software and change the practices and provide opportunities to people to practice those skills across different environments. So it's consistent, as many learning opportunities as possible. And being at the university, we also devise teaching and learning and apply our finding from all these different research projects into the university programs, particularly social work program, SEN education programs, and media production and psychology. So can we move on to the next slide, please? So through that practice, we have developed what we call multimedia advocacy. What it simply means is the best form of advocacy is self-advocacy. That's what we believe. So we were looking, how can we help people with disabilities develop their self-advocacy skills? And because they have those issues with communication and with memories and organizing thinking, we found that actually pictures and fonts really help all of us to reinforce our memories, help us to organize our thinking, and help us to communicate our viewpoints. Like, I'm doing now, I have these slides on the screen. So we do it and we take it for granted. But these technologies and these media can help really people with learning disabilities, even more so, to use those pictures, videos, sound, text, sort of drawing, painting, action, any other form of media to communicate their wishes, wants, preferences, and viewpoints. So we concentrate on that approach. And this approach is based on a set of principles, which are the person-centered planning principles or person-centered working principles, where you work with the view that the person is at the center of that planning process or at the center of that working, actively involved and not stuck there. Which is easier said than done, because what that means that you need to allow time, for the person to process the information and work at their pace and look at what is important to them, tap into the needs, but also tap into the interests and tap into to things that they are, good at, that they're really proud of, change the sort of disability into the abilities. So we were working with that principles, and that's where the training for professionals really came into force, where we wanted to make sure that the self-advocacy is fostered and practiced. And we also apply into this methodology self-advocacy framework developed by David Test from North Carolina University, who, together with his colleagues, did a research, and what they found is that the self-advocacy skills do not come naturally. They need to be taught and learned by people and practiced. And there's there's a framework that has 4 elements into the self-advocacy framework, which is the first one, knowledge of self. That's where we use pictures, videos to capture information about the self. Then is knowledge of rights, knowing what sort of rights I have. And for example, right to communicate for everybody is a basic human right. So the person with profound multiple learning difficulties who might need additional device to communicate is not something that is nice to have, is something that I must have because it's my basic human rights. So having that knowledge and having that understanding that this is what I need to communicate, they can now then go and communicate this information effectively to those who need to know. So for example, when they're applying for funding. And the final bit of the third part of the communication of the framework is communication. And the final part is the leadership. So that's where you can, present and motivate others to take action and self-advocate. So with that, if we can move on to the next slide, please. So with that approach and with that work, we have developed a number of different software tools to help people to organize their thinking and thoughts. So what you see here is the RIX Wiki in the middle, that sort of a spider diagram. That's the RIX Wiki, which is an online password protected, secure system that enables people, so it's organized in that sort of content because that's what people wanted, that's how they think. They think mind map, they don't think in a linear format. They like to use pictures first, so you add pictures, and professionals and those who work with the individuals are forced to first add the picture. Then they can think what I want to say about that picture. They can then add words, they can add sound recording, they can add video, they can add any form of attachment. It's owned by the individual.
Yeah. Yes, sorry for interrupting, but we are running a little bit short of time, so
I'll move on very quickly.
I'm sorry, really.
Okay, I'll move on very quickly. So yeah, so that's the software tool that we used that is based, on our research. And it's been going through lots of iterations back from this first version of that software was back in 2010. So we've done many iterations. I can speak to people later and give you some access to, well, on our website, there's lots of videos showing how that works for people. And so if you move on to the next slide after that as well. So the final tool is this toolkit that we have, RIX Multi-Me Toolkit, where we came together with a company called Multi-Me. and put our RICS wiki that is there in the middle, that represents the person and everything that the person creates and belongs to them. But we have then additional tools like the Circle tool that enables all the professionals and friends and family to join the person's sort of online networking tool that is safe and secure and could be sort of monitored, and people can learn those social networking skills before going and using mainstream media. They can also, professionals can also communicate and provide better sort of integrated care to individuals and support as they need. They also have the diary tool, which is like a journal. So the individuals can put the journals, and professionals who support, they can see how the person is doing. It's always there. The person can then use it to communicate that information to those who support them in various meetings. They have the calendar that is easy to eat.
Yes, I'm sorry, very sorry, Gosha. I hate having to cut people, but we still have one speaker, and I'd like to have enough spaces for the discussion. So,
okay.
if you don't mind, thank you very much. And we could feel your passion for this topic, really. And so now let's move to our second target group, which is the group of older people. And the presentation for this group is by Pedro Beitia, who will tell us about the program for informational and digital literacy, which is called Alfin Senior. And Pedro, I'd like to ask you, please, if you can remain within the time limit that we had set of 5 minutes, that would be very appreciated. Thank you. Pedro?
Okay, for sure. Hello and good morning, everybody. I would like to thank the organization, especially Francesca, for inviting us to participate in this final conference. We are really, really grateful that our experience, Alfin Senior, was included in the good practice catalog of the Medici project. In the following just 5 minutes, I could give you a brief description of the Alfin Senior program, but if you are interested, you have more information in the Medici website project. Here you have what we look for, who we are. Let me tell you who we are. The Foundation is an organization from the social third sector. We are based in the Basque Country, north of Spain. We are in Bilbao and San Sebastian, and we are trying to generate lasting, inclusive, and sustainable change through knowledge, direct intervention, and the development of social economy and inclusive employment projects. We are very active in the promotion of social third sector and the development of effective social policies. Next slide, Francesca. We carry out Alfin Senior project in year 2010, 2012, near 10 years ago, but Francesca told me that it would be very, very interesting to share our experience at that time. In our research at that time, we observed that the policies and programs, at least in our area, were based more on connectivity and instrumental training in ICTs than on improvement of competences. In contrast to the benefits that ICTs could bring, it was clear that it started to generate new forms of social exclusion, creating what was known as, the digital divide. At that time, many international organizations began to focus attention on the value of and necessity of including information literacy as a prerequisite for effective participation in information society. We took reference from UNESCO, from the ISECO project, for IFLA, that is the International Federation of Library Associations, another reference. Next. Thank you. As I told you, there did not seem to be any digital literacy training program in our region at that time to meet the needs of groups with difficulties. So we took our time to develop a program focused on digital and information literacy for elderly people. Why information literacy? Because it deals with the competence related to the use and mastery of information in any of its forms and the technology used to access that information. Digital literacy also means that one can use technology to its effects, efficiently, effectively, and ethically to meet information needs in personal, civic, and professional lives. For us, that was very important for us at that moment because digital literacy was directly related to the promotion of individual autonomy and the development of critical capacity. And that's was one of the best things that we tried with the project, at that time. Next, Francesca. Here you can find our objectives. We try to contribute to the successful inclusion as a full member in information society for elderly people, the promotion of their critical capacity and personal autonomy, the promotion of their participation, the recognition of new technologies and as a necessary and affordable resource for this group, and in short, their active aging and the enhancement of the quality of life. Next. We wanted elderly people who were able to determine the extent of information needed, that they were able to access the needed information effectively and efficiently, that they were able to evaluate information at its source critically, and that they use information to fulfill a specific purpose. Understanding many of the legal and ethic issues that surrounds the use of information. Next. These were the competences that we were trying to work with the seniors, and to be able that the elderly people that were able to recognize the impact of ICTs on society, that they were be able to use information technology effectively and efficiently, learning to learn. This is a cross-cutting competence. This is a competence closely linked to the psychology of learning and therefore linked it to active aging and lifelong learning. Search and access information effectively and efficiently, to be able to work in a team, to be able to share information and to use information ethically and legally. And next, and just to finish, well, we were working with 180 senior citizen at that time. It was a project that was supported by the Basque government and also a bank foundation here in the Biscay province. And this, you can find here the main conclusions we reached at that time. No? The application of information literacy methodology adapted to the needs of senior citizens, the application of methodologies experienced in the framework of the formal education, a training program that seeks to include dimension of active aging and lifelong learning. Not only knowledge, but also skills and attitudes were transferred in a practical way, and the application of an innovative concept such information literacy in the field of social intervention. And that's all with the 5 minutes. So thank you very much, and we continue later. Okay, thank you.
Yes, thank you very much. And so now that was the last presentation of this session, and we can move on now to our round table. And just for a start, I'd like to, well, I'd like to launch the discussion saying that as we've seen, there is a lot of benefits, such as empowerment, such as also self-esteem that comes with digital inclusion for our groups. But as always, benefits come with a few challenges that you mentioned in your presentations. And in our case, it seems one of the biggest challenges for these groups getting online is being aware of the risks that they may encounter online, and how to make the most of their digital skills to use the internet and to use technology and protect themselves from these risks. So my question for you is, what solutions could be put in place to tackle this issue without limiting the rights of these people to communicate and to express themselves?
Francesca, can I ask one question? What about this recorded talk?
Yes, it is being recorded.
No, that was it from Jill. There were four presenters.
Yes, sorry, yes, but we've run out of time.
Okay,
and so
okay,
I'll show it afterwards. Could we start the discussion, please? Gosha, would you like to start?
Yes, thank you.
I know you're very passionate about this.
Yeah, I mean, I always like to think that, the problem is not the people. So yes, there are very big risks for, online participation for vulnerable groups, so people with disabilities, but also children and elderly people, that they are aware of those risks. And I think the awareness of this risk is not necessarily a problem. It's good to be aware. But it's giving people opportunities to practice and learn how to be safe online. First of all, it's an important skill that unless you have opportunity to practice this skill from early on, then you're not going to develop that, that competency, that digital online competency. Secondly, I think it's not only to sort of change the practice and get people to learn. It's also the responsibility of the governments and policies and those who develop those technologies to make them safer. So there could be measures in place to make the participation safer. It's about educating, people, for example, bullying. It's educating the wider audiences of presence of different people with different needs and abilities. So having that intensify sort of people to difference and value difference. So there's lots of things that could be done. It's not just about don't go online because it's not safe. Because if we had that mentality, don't go outside because bad things might happen. So I think it's just changing that and thinking, whose responsibility is it to make online participation for vulnerable groups safe?
Yes, and Ineke, what do you think? You mentioned something in your presentation regarding this issue.
Because I'm not sure about this, because I think many of our people have that I don't know how to phrase it, low intellectual capabilities, that they just do not understand what they would be doing wrong. And especially not when it's over several messages. In one mail they can write, my father is working for the fire brigade. And the next one, we live next to Brussels. And the third one, my mother. They can tell several things in several messages, and after 3 or 4 mails, you know exactly who he is and what about him, etc. So they just can't oversee what they are writing. Just like small children, 6 or 7 years old, they don't see what the problem would be. So
yes, but they need to learn somewhere.
Yes, they can't. They don't have that possibility. They cannot read or write, etc. They have just the intellectual age of 3 or 4 years old.
Yes, but the life experience of 20-year-old or 30-year-old. And I think we need to remember that, we're dealing with adults, for example, with learning difficulties that go in online. And yes, unless we give them opportunities to learn, they will never learn. During COVID, we had this online social networking tool that I was describing at the end, where people with disabilities, various additional needs and behavioral challenges and, some complex, they needed to use the social networking because that was the only way to connect with the staff, for example. Staff was surprised how capable they were. Staff often assumes that the people have less capabilities that they give them credit for, unless we give them opportunities to practice. So creating safe space, I think, is important. But I would say that the fact that we have this worry that they will make a mistake is definitely not something to stop us from letting people benefit from those relationships, especially that people with disabilities have less relationships. Those social networking, online networking, allow people to make more friendships and connections with different people. Of course there are worries, but I think it's the education systems, security sort of measures in place that might stop or block, for example, abusive content. So they will learn quickly that if I say some rude words, my message will be blocked because I have these measures in place.
Okay, it's not that much. That's the kind of things I'm worried about. It's more about where the keys are, what the code of Mama's thing is, where Mama has her wallet with how many money is in there, that kind of stuff. So what we say, okay, we don't say you cannot use the tools, but we tell the parents or the carers, please talk with them, and every now and then take care of them, just like you would do with, youngsters, 4 or 5 years old.
Yes, but caring can be very disempowering. I believe that you need to be given opportunities to make mistakes to learn. If I have too much care, there is this term that's called developing self-helplessness, that because of too much care and support. So that's the worry, that if you give too much care and support and protect people too much from those sort of mistakes, they will never, we need have those opportunities to learn. Otherwise, we will keep people at that mental age and the physical age of 2 or 3 or 7. And, so only the life experience of an adult give people that confidence and that skill.
Yeah, we won't agree about this. Yeah.
Sorry for interrupting you. I'd like to hear what Pedro thinks from his observation point, which is that of helping older people to get online without running the risks of, for example, scams, identity thefts, etc., when purchasing things.
Yeah. Well, just to continue with one of the questions that there is in the chat that is related to this one that Francesca is asking me. Well, one of the major benefits, I think, is relationships. Some of the people that came to our program were at the beginning, they felt stuck and pretty down when she joined the training, and it was good to see how just the act of encourage them to come along to the first trainings, to the first lessons, make a great change. No? And relationships are in the middle because they were with others, they wanted to have fun, to make friends. There were people that had difficulties. I mean, most of our people were people that they didn't have skills, basically. But they found a place where they could meet and they could learn systemic competencies. That means capacity for problem solving, decision making, understanding of concept as a whole, at least. No, so that's for our point of view was a good results. And talking about what you are asking me, Francesca, it's true that well, we try to train them on safety practices that seniors can use to help protect themselves online, take care of strangers, never provide any other sensitive information online, because it was one of the main worries at the beginning. No, I don't know how to use this, and I am protect online. So we're trying to at that time we have to be aware also about the shop and bank online safety. And you remember that we are talking about 210. Things changed a lot on that issues, but at that time it was also quite a problem for them. No, they didn't know how to use it. So we make some exercise on how to report if they have problems, contact with the police, contact with elderly associations in the area in case you need assistance or help or to be with others, with other people or senior people. So we are trying to manage all the situations with an integral approach to provide them or to combat them also loneliness.
Yeah, okay, thank you. And do we have any questions from our audience in the chat? Georgie, hello. Are there any questions for our speakers or any remarks on this issue that we are discussing? Because I think this is quite a sensitive one, which I think more or less all those users who have these kinds of issues have encountered. If not, please.
No, I was just going to say, first of all, thank you very much to all of you. Really such interesting and very relevant, pertinent presentations, not just 2010-12, but now as well, Pedro. Very applicable to where we are. We haven't got any specific questions in the chat, but I would just like to, perhaps if it's okay, then use a bit of the space to just perhaps ask, and this might apply for all the speakers. So it is something about where we are now. And I think so Pedro, particularly, let's say with older people, I think when you were running the Alfin project at that time, there were opportunities for older people to come to somewhere physically, and certainly projects I work with. So older people, so it was a way of trying to reduce social isolation because they were being brought to the room, literally in a minibus or whatever it was. Whereas while the principles I think seem to still apply, we now have a situation where we can't do that. And so I think that has a knock-on effect also for questions around risk and safety, because they haven't got perhaps a facilitator going around looking at every screen and making sure that people are learning about how to keep themselves safe. So I just wondered if there were any thoughts about this sort of way in which our context has changed and how the principles are applied that you've talked about. So it was a bit of a rambling question. It wasn't a question, it was just an idea to think about, really, where we are now.
Very, very interesting question. We have run a project called Stay Connected during COVID-19 with schools, day services, residential settings, and individuals who were supporting people with learning disabilities. And the idea was to help with the isolation. What we found is had very good engagement of 250 people with disabilities, but also we lost a lot of connections that were only available via phone because people didn't have access to technologies. Also because families didn't have skills to support the individuals who were not able to participate in using digital technologies prior to COVID. So that's what we found. Definitely a big gap and big assumptions that people have access to technologies, that people have access to the internet. What we found that as soon as the member from Day Center, for example, had to isolate with the family didn't have internet, couldn't connect, couldn't support the person who was very able to do that from the day center, for example. So that's what we found. Quite interesting to see how many people with disability don't have it, but also the attitude of those who support them. If they were not brought on board to use technologies prior, then that was no. But on the positive side, what we found that support staff, for example, in residential settings, they also use very limited technologies. They don't often have work emails, so they don't have, they don't need to use technologies at the day-to-day basis. Here, suddenly, they had to provide care and support and check in on people using digital technologies. And the software tools that we have, those sort of Multi-Me Toolkit, Trix Multi-Me Toolkit, this week we actually running focus groups, and I had some yesterday and the day before. And what we're finding that they were surprised by how the service users were able to do it remotely from home, the ones who knew how to use technologies, how easy that was for them as well to connect, and how much more they were able to find out about people on that sort of person-centered perspectives, and seeing them as individuals rather than someone with Down syndrome or someone with profound disabilities. I was running a focus group for service users on Monday, and I had people, with physical disabilities sitting on the sofa. So the family put them on the sofa. They were immobile, and had this distorted speech. But they were able to put the microphone on and off when they were going to speak. They had lots of background noise, so that sort of suggested, big family not being able to then move to the private space, and and other issues. But that was, very nice to see that even those with complex needs were able to connect and give their feedback. And they valued the interaction, and they valued the fact that they were able to meet other people with disabilities online that were not part of the day service, which was another interesting, we talk about relationships and how important it has been for all of us during COVID time.
I think that's fascinating, the unintended consequences of our, the pandemic is perhaps a greater level of digital inclusion in some ways.
Sorry, we have a question for Gosha, a question from Andrew, and it is: did you effectively use peer-to-peer learning or was the watchful parent teacher the reference point for individuals?
No, we had very successful peer-to-peer learning. I have a person with learning disabilities employed by the university working with us since 2006. We have a user group of people with learning disabilities. During COVID, we have got together online with people with disabilities, just me as one adult without disability. And we worked together, developed a training we're commissioned by Digital Unite. And we developed a Zoom training for people with disabilities who were then, so that the people who were developing it were as champions teaching other people with disabilities. Yes, so that's one example, but I see it over and over again. My colleague AJ, who has learning disability, he goes out and gives training on his own to other people with disabilities. We train trainers, so again, they go and teach others, so peer-to-peer learning is really important. Yesterday, on Monday, when I had the service user meeting, the focus group, also one person have said that she taught other people from the day center how to use the software and how to get online and supported them. So we see it all the time. If we give people the right support and assume that they can do it, you'd be surprised. And you put people in person, give them different roles, you really can be surprised. This group of people can really contribute to society, and they need to be visible more in those different roles, role models, of teaching others. So peer-to-peer learning can happen, and we had lots of examples of that.
That was also the case in our project. And even when they did not know that much, they were very eager to share it with them and also to share it with us.
Yeah.
But you should do that and that way. That's much better. Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, inclusion, it sort of addresses also the work opportunity and our value, what we get from having opportunities to work, and having opportunities contributes to different, causes. And so for people with disabilities, if they don't have those opportunities, they're missing out further exclusion. And so, that's work opportunity. Yeah. So just another point. Thank you. Did that answer your question? Sorry.
Oh, yes, thank you. I was going to ask you about the onboarding and how people were recruited, because did they put their hands up and volunteer, or did they get approached through a list or a group or some other mechanism?
Yes, thank you. So yes, we had a long onboarding process. It wasn't as easy as we hoped. We were commissioned by TechForce 19 from NHSX to help that community of users. So we approach organizations, we are asked to do a wide scale implementation. So we approach organizations, local authorities, and day services and supported living services. And then we had to work with the managers from the top of those organizations, who had then identified the users who can participate. And at that point, they found that a lot of users did not have access to technologies. They were assuming that much more people will have access to technology. So that was an interesting point during that onboarding process. And then we created lots of training materials, video, easy to understand. So there's another thing, people talk about easy read. We talk about easy to understand, because a lot of easy read is not easy to understand. So we're creating easy to understand learning resources, that there were one-page PDF files with video links to video explaining exactly what to do and how to do it. We provided training and support session every day for people to sort of get on board and learn how to use the software. So we had lots of learning from that onboarding process. It took much longer than we anticipated, because the duration of the project, which was defined by the funder, was much shorter. And what we found out that onboarding is, especially when you're addressing the top of organizations and not having access to the frontline sort of people, that takes much, much longer. But can be done effectively.
That's great, thank you. Do you think something like Medici could be a sharing repository for those sort of materials, or does everyone have to go and produce their own?
Well, some of these materials are specific to the software itself, but some of the materials absolutely can be shared.
Yes, so, yes, and may I add that in our catalog you can already find the information on RixWiki And there is the information is rather exhaustive, I think, with links to both RIX Research and Media and to the RIX-Wiki website. And I have a question from Marco, who asks, in your programs, especially for the training, do you include also the parents, irrespective of the age of the people with disabilities?
That depends very much. We work with parents when children are in school, that I provide training for parents as well in the evenings or during the pickup times. Without COVID now, it's all online. So yes, but when they are adults, depending where they are and what is their family connection, then parents are not always a part of they might log in and check in, into the circle, but I might not work with them directly. I mean, during COVID, I got to know and support quite a few families where parents on board, and when they saw the software, for example, the RIX Multimedia Toolkit, they were interested how much more they can achieve with the use of the software. And what I sort of find that parents get fascinated when they see that, yes, we use the software, but actually what we're talking about is the holistic approach to helping and empowering people. And that's what we're trying to do with everything we do, with those easy to read materials, with the training. It's all about empowering the person and working with those who support that person to show them what they could do to help with that as well.
Yes, we have received a reminder that we have 2 minutes, 31 seconds left before we get back to the main room. Georgie?
Just that we did have one other question about particular reference to older people, which is about motivation. What motivates older people to get involved in all of this? And I think that was from Sandra. And Vanessa, you also put something about there's older people with learning difficulties as well to consider in terms of isolation. So even if there isn't time to talk about it much, I think the question of motivation for older people, why would they want a smartphone? That should be the question.
It not be able to project another EU proposal.
Sorry, excuse me, sorry. I think the question was for Pedro.
Oh, sorry.
For Pedro or you're talking about older people. Is it about older people? Did I understand correctly?
Yes. Yeah.
So yes, I think the question is for Pedro.
Well, in our case, we have already people that they were working with these elderly people that they were dealing in other programs, and they were constantly with these elderly people. So the motivation was quite easy at that time because the elderly people already knew the facilitators, for saying in one word, no. So we encourage them to come to the training, but also to work in a team in other moments apart from the training period. So these facilitators continue working with them, not only in the class, but always in the daily life. What happens to them when they go out, when they start to use the mobile. In the year 2010, not all these elderly people have the smartphones, so they have just a mobile. So some of them, they start to have a smartphone. So how to deal with these smartphones. I remember the questions, and the facilitators say to be with them all the time during a period of time, large period of time, dealing with all these issues. Okay, that's all. But motivation is true. It's true. When we are talking about isolation, it's true. It's a very important factor.
Okay, so thanks everyone. Let's go back to the
session as well was interactive. I mean, the idea of those two parallel sessions was really to bring to the attention
who is daily working on digital inclusion, and to show you some example of organization that and activities that you can of course find in the knowledge community, but all around us. So anytime you have question about the activities, you have also all the contact on the knowledge community. You can get in touch directly with them, or you can write any of the partner of the project in order to get more information.
Yes, you've on the Eventbrite, you've got also the names of the panelists there. So you can always also contact me and the organizer if you would like to have the email to contact some of the panelists. Thank you again for participation, and I hope it was worth it. And I would like to invite you in the afternoon for our next session that starts at 2 o'clock CET, so Central European time. And we're gonna look at some complex needs further, going into those specific vulnerable groups of people. So more case studies, more good practices, and more discussions. So today is day 2, tomorrow is day 3. So I also wanted to invite you for tomorrow. You can check our program on the webpage. And till then, thank you very much. And
thank you very much.
Thank you.
Bye.
Thank you very much.
Bye bye.
Thank you. It was very interesting. Thank you.
Bye bye.
Bye bye. Ciao ciao.
Okay, thank you everybody.
Bye. Grazie mille Anna.